Hey! Plug those water fountains in before I go.
I'm positive. Oh, I bet I forgot to put a link.
You said we're on, sir.
Yeah.
Deb, do you want to take a roll call, please?
Slade,
Yes.
Cody,
Yep.
Corey,
Present.
Mark,
Yes.
Kyle.
Yes. All right, we need a motion to approve the agenda, and I think there were a few there I saw, right?
Yeah, well, one of them, number 6 on there, I was planning to address during my report anyway, but I figured I'd just put it on there. Number 4, I apologize for number 4. Debbie and I were kind of talking about that the end of last week, and we put in a request to the state to find out, because we already submitted all that stuff, whether we could go back and essentially ask for less is what we were considering doing on the opt-out stuff. And I'll get to that when we get to our point in time. So, but yeah, other than that, I don't have anything else.
Anybody have any questions? I need a motion to approve the agenda then.
So moved.
Motion by Slade,
Second.
second by Cody. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same, sorry, I'll delay. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Conflict of interest disclosures.
Those that have been presented to me.
Any public input?
The only thing I have is I don't know if Corey, if Riley's around there at some point in time when we start talking about that spectator stuff. I know he mentioned there were some junior high kids that kind of were concerned that they weren't getting a chance to watch their team or their classmates play, but the high school did. So if he's around later when we get to that, he's more than welcome to share.
Yep, he's in the next room,
Okay.
armed and ready.
All right.
All right. Then we need a motion to approve the following. Minutes of the regularly scheduled school board meeting of October 14th, 2020. Minutes of the Corn Belt Cooperative Board Advisors meetings of October 21st, 2020. Financial report, claims for November.
So moved.
Motion by Slade, second by Mark. Anybody got any questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Mr. Voss.
This year we had 23 kids that are participating in the Sack Pack program that was run by the Bethany Church in conjunction with the food pantry. And those kids sign up, and then there's a sack of food sent home with them on Fridays, just try to help them out on the weekends when they don't have school lunch. I think 23 is up a little bit from last year. Elementary had their Halloween parties on the 30th. We normally have our big costume parade with the parents, and since we weren't able to do that with the parents, we did have our partial online, it's partially packet with the online help session. I think it's gone okay. It looks like we got almost every kid in there participating. How's it going at your house, Kyle?
My wife's in charge of most of that.
Okay. But I think it's probably.
So probably, yes.
I think it's probably appropriate for this age group to kind of do the hybrid model. And having another teacher that had to see it from had a couple teachers that had stayed home and had to look at it from the student side, probably feel comfortable that we could probably take that model all the way down to second grade if we had to. But that's probably about as far as we could probably go with that hybrid model. And I even questioned second grade, but she sees it from the student side and thinks that she could probably model that if she had to in second grade. So that would only leave really kindergarten and first grade where online option would be pretty limited. As we started the online option, internet service in the homes, and a few homes became an issue. And most of the homes that the internet was an issue was a lot of our Spanish-speaking families. There was information sent out to the state about free internet in the homes, and I'm assuming it was in English, so they didn't read it, and they probably threw it away and didn't understand it. Rebecca Peterson is our EL teacher here in town, and she has contacted the families that didn't have the internet right away. And then she's also been in contact with the telco and found a person in the telco company that speaks Spanish. So she is connecting the families with the Spanish-speaking person with the telco. And I believe we are down to one family that doesn't have the internet, and they're scheduled to get it this week. So Rebecca's done quite a bit on that part. Fifth grade went remote on November 6th. I popped in there, he had 99% turnout today. The one is the one family that's waiting for the internet this week. Our special needs room was closed over the weekend, and they're gonna do packets, and that was because of positive test with a staff member. Right now, we have our K3 on site, and in my K3 students, I have 6 of those students that are in quarantine, and they're in quarantine due to exposures outside of the school building. So in my K3, I got 6 kids that are in quarantine. Like today, the elementary staff, we had 5 staff members gone today, all related to COVID. I've given out 7 COVID tests at the elementary, and of the 7 COVID tests that I have administered, I've had 2 positive tests with the COVID tests that I've administered at the elementary. That's all I have.
Questions? Thank you, Mr. Voss. Will?
Just kind of have one thing. I think Coons is covering a lot of the main topics going on right now. Our teachers are all, the majority of them are doing online learning. We have 5 through 9 that's all out right now, and so I think we're having a lot of success. The teachers I've talked to, they said that they don't like it, but they're managing. They're finding ways to keep kids engaged. In the 3 classes I teach, I think I've had about 99% kids show up every single time. They participate, ask questions. Nothing really is different other than the fact that they're not in the classroom, so it's been going well. And then 10 through 12 had the option to stay home, and we only had 10 kids in school today. All the rest of those kids opted to stay home. So I think more of the teachers are getting all in on doing it online learning, and from what I've seen so far, it's going well. But we'll see as kind of the weeks, or I guess this week go, and the weeks after that go, how it proceeds when we get to test time, or they run out of the stuff that they plan to do online, have to start thinking on their toes a little bit. So that's the only thing I really have.
Okay. Questions? Thank you, Will. Kevin?
Just to piggyback off what you said too, I think, and you've been out in the classroom a lot more than I've been able to the last few days, but I think as the teachers are kind of getting into it, like you said, it's a lot to try to transition to that type of learning environment, but I think as they get into it, they're starting to kind of get an idea of what works and what doesn't work, so we're kind of fortunate at this point in time we've been able to iron out some of the kinks. I know like last Friday when some of those 5 through 9 kids went online or went remote, you know, we'd had some kids here and there that have been doing it a couple times throughout the school year, but to do it on like a full scale like that, we kind of assumed that Friday was probably going to be a little bit of a feeling out process. So I think today was much better than what we saw on Friday as far as that stuff goes. But I know like what you said, what I've seen too is there's not a whole lot of difference, at least on this end of the building, with being here or being online as far as some of that stuff goes. So teachers are doing a really good job with what they've been dealt there, so. So I got a bunch of stuff here. I'm gonna start with, we talked a little bit about potential sports co-op and maybe further on down the road, consolidation with Marion. Prior to last month's meeting, we kind of put things on hold as far as scheduling any more meetings with them at this point in time, because we wanted to see what the Activities Association was going to come up with as far as their, I guess, their football classification stuff to start with. And based on where they are right now, it looks like they're going to still stick with a 7-class system, which was not actually one of the things that was their proposals initially. They were going to go down to 5 or 6. They decided to stay with 7. Their cutoff numbers between 11-man and 9-man are not going to change. I believe they had a first reading of this with the intention that it's going to pass in December when they have their next meeting. So what that essentially means for us, if we look at some numbers, between Freeman and Canastota next year, our boys ADM is probably going to be around 47 or 48. Now that can move a little bit because they don't take that count until December. The cutoff for 11-man or between 9-man and 11 is 56. So if you take what Marion is projecting to be their boys ADM and add it to that, we will be over the 56 cutoff and have to go from 9-man to 11-man. And right now, we're projecting Marion's to be around 16 kids, so that's going to put us into the low 60s. So we'd be probably a good 6, 7, 8 over what that mark would be. So I've had some conversations with Canastota, and I guess collectively our thought is we don't really want to do anything to jeopardize what we currently have going on. So I don't believe there's any interest on their end as far as having a third team come in if that's going to push us to 11-man football. So aside from the football thing, then you have the numbers for every, for your other sports. If you're just looking at Freeman and Marion, we'd be speculating right now the cutoff to go from B to A is 89.999. As far as this year's count, we're going to be right up to that number. I mean, we're guessing when we looked at it, would we say probably 88 or 89?
Right.
And obviously that can fluctuate one way or the other if you lose or gain a couple kids before that first Friday in December. So that's another, issue. Now, the thing that's weird about this year is usually when they take the count in December, that sets you up for the next 2 school years. This time around, it's only going to set you up for the next one because they want to get on the same classification rotation as all the neighboring states because we're off, I guess, a year. So whatever they do in December this year is set up for the 2021-22 school year. And then they will recount again next December for the next 2 years. Now, if you look at our numbers moving forward, our numbers in the elementary school and in our middle school classes actually are better than they are in our high school. So, I have a hard time believing that after, if we could squeak by next year, I have a hard time believing in years after that we're going to be able to stay below that A classification. So, I guess with where we're at right now, I think we just, and we don't necessarily have to make this decision tonight, but we just need to decide, I guess, do we have any interest in doing anything different with football as far as, like I said, what I'm getting from Canastota is they want to continue with what we have and not real interested in moving up a classification. Do you want to do something other than that, which I suppose would involve not going with Canastota and just going with Marion instead? Or are we just going to, do we want to just leave the football thing alone? And then the other question would be, what's our stance on moving from B to A if we were to consider co-oping and stuff other than football? And I think that kind of probably drives our process a little bit here as far as figuring those things out before we jump into some of this other stuff. I guess that's my thought on that anyway. So I don't know where everybody kind of stands on.
So we have 47 or 48 kids with Canastota for football. What is the actual breakdown on that?
As far as
think we're like
Freeman
20, maybe like 22, right?
Ours is gonna be 22, I believe theirs is gonna be 26. They actually have more kids in, and that's just boys.
Right,
In 9 through 11 as of this year. We actually don't, this is kind of a, we're down, I think, we'll be down about 6 boys from where our count was 2 years ago. And they're gonna be up like 8 or 9, I think, from where they were.
It'll change in a couple of years, I think, maybe in the next 2 weeks.
right, so then,
I think there was, excuse me, I think there was a projection years ago where it's going to swap back and forth for a number of years. I know they talked about that earlier. Yeah, one year they're gonna have a bunch of guys, next year we're gonna have a bunch, and it's just gonna keep yo-yoing a little bit, where they're gonna have, where it's gonna be, you know, kind of the same numbers, but yet each school will contribute, and it's gonna, you know, it's gonna turn out okay. But you look at the classes below that in the 7th and 8th grade right now, and you look at the 5th and 6th grade boys football team that played this year. There's we get a lot of boys coming up in the next few years that are going to be contributing factors. I think the numbers are up. Why is that? Because there's championship football being played.
So I guess, like I said, my opinion would be, I think we just leave football alone for right now. I mean, that would be, and obviously it's not my decision, but I have a hard time jeopardizing, you know, what we've already done. And like Corey alluded to also, this stuff isn't just high school, this is all the way down into the youth football stuff where we've started kind of building that. And I guess I don't know what the public perception would be as far as moving from 9-man to 11. Like I said, Canastota, from what I've heard from Canastota, they're not interested in making that jump. So if you didn't want to do that, I think you're looking at, you know, having to get rid of the Canastota thing and just go Freeman Marion, which, again, I just don't know if that makes sense at this point in time.
From the conversations I've had, I think I'm pretty well stuck on keeping the status quo as well.
Yeah, there's very few people that have said we need to move away from this. I think when you go back, when Corey and I, the old guys here, started, that's when they actually had to play a JV season. And so we were thankful that we were able to tack on to Canastota. And I was thankful that that first year we did. They probably could have gone to the Dome, but because of us, we went up the class, and they didn't win that championship, which they probably could. So Canastota has really done some stuff for us that probably would have never expected. So I've been very thankful for that cooperation, and I think just the success we've had. So at this point, I feel pretty happy with what we've got.
I think it's worked out fine with Canastota. My concern is, I think we're looking at a pretty narrow window of potential scope, like, if numbers continue to go down for students as they have in, you know, I don't know what they've probably dropped in the 15 years, it's 20 years since I've been out, but I'm guessing it's probably somewhere-ish, close to 10 kids per class. And I just think that over football or 11-man, I think that seems nearsighted to just completely close the door on continuing to look at something that could potentially be beneficial for the school years down the road. But that's my opinion.
Well, and I think what's on the table, let me go back here for a second. So we've kind of been having two conversations, right?
Right.
We've been having the conversation about potentially co-oping sports, which my understanding is that Marion wants that to happen next year.
Well, all right.
And then there's the, okay, maybe 3-4 years down the road, we talk about schools actually going together. So, you know, unfortunately, we're kind of up against the clock a little bit here as far as the sports co-op for next year thing goes. So I think we kind of have to decide, like, short term, and then do we still want to continue on with the conversation about schools potentially going together? And if that's going to be the case, obviously the sports thing is going to go with that. You know, it's not a real easy decision to make because, you know, Marion came to us and is looking to try to, you know, we're trying to mutually come up with something there. Just based on the circumstances right now, I just don't know how we can justify, at least short term, moving away from where we're at now.
And I think when we went there talking with them, I was under the understanding that it was about the sports co-op. And then the school co-op came kind of as a latter portion of that. I just don't see a school co-op happening without a sports co-op happening first, kind of like a preliminary courtship period. And without that courtship period to see how things kind of run, I don't see the rest of that conversation having any merit right now.
People I talked to just said that, you know, just think about it and make sure that we're just not left out there and everybody else is already gone, and here we are as Freeman sitting in the middle of no man's land with nothing to fall back on.
I've had the conversation with one of our constituents. They were talking about this thing too, and they were talking also, I don't know how many kids play football for the co-op over with Menno from the academy. I think they've added a few kids also. So I don't know how many kids that would involve, but I believe you're gonna have, if we're gonna fall out of bed with Canastota, which I don't think is a great idea, you're gonna have to look at the academy too to see what they contribute. So if you have Marion and then the academy, what are they gonna contribute for numbers? 'Cause I think there's a few academy kids that play for that football team there also.
Right, so that's only gonna take that's gonna take your ADM number up even more, right? And then, you know, if you start talking about sports other than football, if you're thinking about Freeman Academy being involved in that, then there's gonna be no question at all that you're gonna be going from B to A. And like I said, you know.
And that's what I told them.
And like, you know, Kyle, I know like you and I have had that conversation before as far as, you know, the concern about moving from B to A. And I don't know that it really bothers me a whole lot, but I don't know what the general perception is out there as far as if we go from that to A, what the, you know, how well that would be received. And it's tough for you guys because, you know, the consolidation thing we talked about that as far as the actual schools going together. That's a vote thing on the part of the people. So we can have meetings, you know, public meetings and talk about that till the cows come home, but at the end of the day, the people get to decide on that. Where the sports co-op thing, that's a board decision to do. So honestly, it puts a lot more pressure on you guys as far as making that decision compared to the schools going together.
My biggest concern in moving from B to A, if you look at our boys basketball team, yes, we have very few guys or kids that are willing to come and play. And now we're gonna go to A, and not, you know, we're having a tough time with keeping boys coming and playing now. You go to A, it is gonna be a shellacking. It won't even be fun, and you think participation is gonna rise, it's not gonna happen. Because these kids wanna play against schools that are competitive, and you make a move up. I would see that these boys are just say, heck with it, we're just gonna play football or we're gonna do other things, and not go play basketball. And I think you see it in the girls too, I really do.
I think I disagree on that. So as far as,
Well, like I said, I don't know that we necessarily have to make a decision right now, but sometime soon we're gonna have to decide what the, you know, because if you're gonna, there's some deadlines as far as if you're actually gonna co-op for next year that we would have to meet, and I wanna say that's maybe December 1st for football.
So at football readjusts, it's 1 year too, football, all sports are 1 year ADMs, right? So for
For
football,
this, however, if you start a new co-op, that's a 4-year commitment too, for football anyway. So,
what about, so we got in with Canastota on a, whatever it was called.
so basically, if we decide Freeman and Canastota are gonna stay together, and we're not gonna pull a 13. My guess is, because Menno is gonna go with Scotland next year, and that's pretty much a done deal, that I would guess Marion's gonna end up filing for some type of hardship. I'm not exactly sure how that works. I believe if they file a hardship, whatever school they want to attach with for that has to agree to that. But I think, you know, there's still going to be issues there as far as if we would accept something like that, would we still have to move up the classification? And I don't know, I'm just guessing, I don't know exactly how that works. If they just look at the number of kids that are actually out for football then, and they consider that as far as your ADM goes, or if you have to take a certain percentage or something like that based on how many kids you have.
A few years ago, the Marion boys came over and played basketball with Freeman, under Freeman. I don't know how that all played out. That was during when Hoskins was here, but those boys came over and played with Freeman, and we did not move up. That's something to look into.
And I'm guessing that would be a hardship situation where they say, we don't have enough to play on our own. We're gonna see if Freeman will take us, and then they just take like, you know, we send 5 kids over, so then we have to take 50% of their ADM or something like that. They used to have weird percentage rules. Or like if they send 7 kids over, we have to take 70% of their ADM, something to that effect. And then wherever that puts us is the classification we have to be in. So I'm just guessing that that is going to be their option if we wouldn't include them as part of the program.
what does our ADM look like the next 3 years if you're gonna stay 9-man, kind of no matter what, anyway?
Well, I think like Corey said, it kind of goes back and forth between Freeman and Canastota. I have a hard time believing we're going to get to that
That 56.
56 in the next couple of years anyway. Because I think as our numbers start to go back up, theirs are going to kind of come back down.
That's what they had projected a number of years ago when we first started this thing, was that there was going to be a yo-yo effect between the communities. One is going to be just a touch higher than the other, and we'll stay in that 9-man football realm for the next 6 to 8 years.
So, like I said, you don't necessarily have to make a decision tonight, but I think those are the questions that probably need to be answered before we decide that we're going to move forward with any more conversations with Marion about some of that other stuff. So do we just want to just move on and?
Good. Fine with you guys? Okay, we'll move on.
Okay. I told you guys we got that allotment of rapid tests. I know Shane said he administered 7 of them. I didn't count specifically, but off the top of my head, I think I've done about 7 or 8 of them on this end too, with 2 positives. I did post some information on the website today, just with some kind of the questions that we've been getting over the last few days about some of this stuff. Basically, the main thing people need to know about those is the accuracy. They're accurate up to 97% if they're administered when there's actually symptoms present. So it's not like we can, if if I was exposed to COVID and I feel fine, 100% okay, this test isn't gonna do a lot for me in terms of giving me a valid result. But like the people that we've had come in with temperatures, runny noses, congested, sore throat, achy, all that stuff, that's where we've been able to use these and actually kind of make some decisions, you know, rather quickly instead of having to wait 3 to 5 days for somebody to get a result to come back. So for the most part, it's been pretty good. They're pretty easy to administer. It's just a nasal swab that goes up both sides, stick it into a little packet, and it comes back with either 1 line or 2 lines, and if it's 2, it's positive.
Pretty fast.
So they've been good. So I mean, I encourage people to take advantage of that if they, you know, if they're in that particular situation. So and all they have to do is give us a call. I know Shane's been taking calls down there. If they want to come in, we'll set something up, and it's pretty quick. Other things, as far as some COVID stuff, had some questions over the last few days about how we go about determining close contacts. And this is some stuff that I put on the website today for people. So what we've been doing is working within what the CDC and the Department of Health say as far as how they define a close contact. Someone has been within 6 feet of an infected person for a total of 15 minutes over a 24-hour period. And we go back 2 days from whenever the illness started or whenever they started to see symptoms. Other things to consider, or that we consider, includes, you know, distances as far as being closer than the 6 feet or not. You know, the room. I know in our most recent situation, we kind of had to take into account the teaching style of the teacher as far as being active and being around the room. So some of that stuff. One of the questions, and I had a couple people reach out to me, and I told them that I probably didn't use the best choice of wording in the message that I sent out to them in terms of when the board passed their resolution as far as how we were going to handle the close contact thing. We should be talking about school exclusion on our end, not necessarily the quarantine aspect of it, because the school doesn't actually have the authority to issue quarantine to anybody. And I think, you know, Shane and I kind of get caught up in some of that stuff because those are kind of the hot button words that everybody's using when they talk about this stuff. But when we determine a close contact, we should be sending the message that, you know, your child is going to be excluded from school and school activities for 14 days, not that you have to quarantine. The directive to quarantine actually comes from the Department of Health. Now, with that said, when we find out about a case in the building, you know, lately it's been from the tests that we've administered, we go through and we do all the contact tracing, you know, for the Department of Health, and then in turn we report that information to the Department of Health. So, you know, when we say something about quarantining, I guess it's probably the expectation that the Department of Health is going to contact you to tell you you should quarantine. But what we've seen, I guess in the cases that we've had, is it's been over a week, if at all, if some of these people are being notified of that. So that's just kind of a correction that we have to make on our end moving forward as we focus on the school exclusion part, not necessarily telling people that they have to quarantine. So that's one thing that we have to clean up a little bit on that end as far as the wording thing. So, and what we've kind of been telling parents is, you know, we're going to keep kids out of school for that long, but as far as what you choose to do when you're outside of the building, I guess that's up to you and, you know, your decision on how you want to handle that, because we don't have any authority to determine how that's going to work for you. I know Shane touched on it a little bit. He said he had 5 staff members out at that end today. I had 3 out on this end today. With a couple people, I know we had a couple people on both ends of the building that are in school working under those essential worker guidelines, just because we don't have enough people to come in and cover what we're trying to do right now. So it's been a little rough on that end, trying to keep everything together. As far as the school exclusion stuff, I know prior to the last meeting, we shared with you some information about what some other schools are doing, and I know I have that on the agenda later, so we'll get to that later as far as some schools getting away from the 14-day quarantine period, but I'll say that a little bit later. Prior to the last meeting, I know a couple of you talked to me about a transportation issue. And I kind of explained that, and I sent an email to the board back in October, kind of about how that situation came up and how everything's kind of played out there. But I figured, because we had some people asking, I would share it, at the board meeting so everybody kind of had an idea. So at the beginning of the school year, we reduced our in-town busing, or we kind of got rid of our in-town busing because we were trying to cut down the number of kids that were on each bus to try to be able to space everybody out. Essentially, by eliminating the in-town stuff, we were able to keep the numbers on each bus to around 12 to 15 kids, somewhere in there, where most of them were kind of coming from the same house, so bus drivers were kind of spacing them out, trying to keep them away from each other. One of the mistakes that I made was we essentially eliminated everything in town except for a stop at one daycare. And I don't know that we ever had a really good justification as to why we kept stopping at that daycare. But what ended up happening is it caused us a bunch of issues along the way because we didn't have a very good justification. But then what we ended up with is a lot of people calling and saying, well, I want you to drop my kid off here in town or here in town because that's where their daycare is after school. And it just kind of became a real big mess. And then with the other after-school program stuff kind of starting downtown there, we were getting requests for like, I don't know, 10 to 12 kids to be riding, getting bussed around town after school, and we just couldn't do it. So we went back and just said, for right now, we're not going to do the in-town busing until things kind of clear up. Debbie and I have talked about, once things kind of maybe get under control a little bit here, how we can make that work. Because I do understand that most schools, the school is kind of a central location in town, and we are on the, the far south side of town, so it does create some problems for people. So, like I said, we're not trying to penalize people. I realize it creates an inconvenience, but we just don't have room on our buses to do that right now. So, like I said, I'll take the blame for it because from the beginning it would have been a lot easier. When you start doing something, then you kind of take it out midway. That tends to create more issues along the way. So that was kind of the little transportation hiccup that we've had along the way here that some of you have been contacting about.
Do we have any additional buses that are reliable that could be used for that? That we were not having to add more students to the existing buses, we would just be designating an additional bus for north of 6th Street, for instance.
We've talked about that. We probably have an extra bus, but we don't have any drivers, is the issue that we run into there.
Do you have any coaches that are drivers that would like to? Coaches have a license.
Well, and that'd be one thing, like even if you did have somebody, would they want to do it either? I mean,
Well, yeah,
that was the thing when last year we had 5 drivers, more or less, and then Charlie retired. So we got our 4 routes, we have our 4 regular drivers. It's really a pain for Debbie, because Debbie does most of the finding subs for that stuff. Like when we have a driver that can't drive in the morning or in the afternoon, it creates a lot of problems.
So Debbie, you're volunteering to get your CDL with bus certificate as well then? Problem solved?
Could be lunch lady and bus driver.
Yeah.
Just say, what's the pay? All I got to do is take the bus portion.
Yeah.
So,
It's gonna keep getting colder and colder. Is there any way we could at least make an attempt to find another bus driver? If we have the additional bus, it's gonna be a little more money, granted, but these are weird circumstances. Let's see if we can't accommodate the people that need that service. Would be in my opinion. I might be in the minority.
I would agree with that, especially north of 6th Street. 6th Street is a busy street going through town, and you got a lot of young kids that have to cross it.
Yeah, I think 6th Street and South, that's definitely still doable even for younger kids. But like you were saying, with the high school and the elementary school being on the edge of town, north of 6th Street is kind of a jaunt for a lot of those younger kids.
Well, and what we've done in the past is we've just tried to pick, and typically it's on that side of town, not always, but we've just tried to pick some kind of like random locations, you know, maybe not random, but like, okay, this spot makes the most sense for people to congregate, so we're not stopping door to door, because that's,
Yeah.
it never.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be stopped door to door, but if you had two spots, one on the east side, one on the west side, north of Sixth Street, get your kids to there, we'll get them to school, we'll get them back there after school.
It never fails every year, and you've gotten these too. We'll get people that call, I need a bus stop for, you know, a pickup for my kid, and then they'll roll off the address, and it'll literally be 2 blocks away from the school.
Then,
some of those
then
kids-
I understand that,
But
but
no,
then
I'm
you
just
guys
saying-
have to tell them, our spot is here and here. Get them to that, and we're accommodating for the rest of the
Or
way.
some of those kids you're talking about, they ride the bus home and they're back on the school property playing in the playground before I leave. And I'm sitting going, you really need bus service when you took the bus home and now you're back on?
Yeah, but that's not our responsibility.
Anyway, yeah, we can,
How many kids ride a bus, how many kids ride each bus roughly, not like, on each bus that goes out now? Like,
we're between 12 and 15,
on every bus?
yeah. That's, at least that's what we have listed on our
And that's what
route.
everyone shows.
Now, obviously, we're down a little bit right now because we don't have some of those middle school grades in there right now, but. Student meals, I know we sent something out, I think, at some point in time, where we said that that program has been extended through June 30th of 2021. And like I said, that's been out there for everybody, but I think when you have a free moment, you should probably thank Debbie a little bit, because she had to put in a whole lot of work to make that happen, and there was a lot of hoops to jump through. So she kind of busted her rear end a little bit to make that possible there in, I think it was October we started that, so. It's a good deal for kids. I mean, in the end, we end up eating a little money on our end because the amount of reimbursement we get for those meals is not the same as what it would be if we're actually charging people for it, but at the same time, I mean, if kids are gonna get meals, and right now, people don't have to worry about paying for them, that's okay, so. What's up? We do a daily call with the hospital every day, just to kind of talk about what's going on and get some ideas about, you know, this, that, and everything else with this COVID stuff. One of the things that they brought up, and I don't think you guys were actually in on the meeting on Friday, because I think you were busy running around, but they're in the process of, they always have a community health nurse that kind of goes around, and we contract with them every year for different things. They come over and do, you know, hygiene stuff, or, you know, a lot of stuff down in elementary with the younger grades. But they're in the process of looking for a new health nurse, and I told them I would run the idea by you, because they were curious if we would be at all interested in contracting with them for like so many hours a day or so many hours a week to actually have a registered nurse in the building. And again, it's just kind of something for you to think about a little bit. I don't know, we don't know yet what those numbers would actually look like, but they just kind of tossed it out there. You know, Shane, when you were in Alcester, they had a nurse in the building, didn't they? Was that a halftime deal?
I'd say half, yeah, probably half.
Something like that. So, I don't know if that's something you'd be interested in. I know the thing that we kind of talked about a little bit was, you know, right now, it probably wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to have somebody around, but like, once we kind of get all this stuff under control and we start moving forward, would we have the justification to have a nurse in the building for, you know, whatever it happens to be, 3-4 hours a day, or whatever we would decide? Would there be enough for them to do, you know, beyond what they would have to do right now? Because I know, like, based on what Shane and I have been doing with some of that stuff, we'd love to have a nurse around, so we didn't have to run around and do all that stuff, but long-term, you know, I don't know the answer to that, so.
Or no ice packs fix a lot of things on my end. Good to put an ice pack in it, here's quick.
You are really good at the whole lice scenario too, so I would hate to take that away from you. So just something to think about. I don't know if you have any interest in, you know, if you want to send something to me later, just to kind of see where you're at on that, that's fine. I'm sure that they're probably gonna wanna know, sooner rather than later, whether we'd be interested in doing some type of partnership there, so. If you have any initial thoughts on that, or you wanna just hold on to that?
Seems like a luxury, not a necessity.
I would agree with that.
Alrighty.
And then the last thing, I sent you an email early last week. Kind of was checking with some other schools. A lot of other schools have been talking about doing some type of stipend thing for staff members, for their staff members, based on the extra responsibilities their staff has been taking on because of everything that's going on. I sent you a list, about 9 different schools that I heard back from. Some of those, I think of those, two of the 9 were kind of waiting. 3 of the 9 were kind of waiting to see what would happen moving forward. The rest of them were kind of in that $1,000 range as far as one-time payments to staff members. Some of those schools tiered those down where it would be $1,000 for certified staff, and then like a lesser amount, like $750 or $500 for classified staff. I don't know how much thought you put into that since
Kevin, were they using their COVID dollars?
they're using their COVID dollars. So I don't know how much thought anybody has put into that, but based on talking with Debbie and seeing what kind of some of these other schools are doing, and then also considering the added responsibility that a lot of our people are putting in, I mean, I would really like to see us go with $1,000 for our staff members as far as a one-time deal. I don't know what everybody else's thoughts are on that, one way or the other. If they'd be interested in doing it now before Christmas, or if it's something where we want to wait till the end of the school year to see how much everybody's actually, put in at that point in time, but.
Will your item number 4 about the general fund opt-out maybe affect this discussion?
I don't think so, because a lot of that COVID money is not included in a lot of that general fund cap stuff right now. So they kind of, basically they gave us that allotment of money, which you said was like $140-some thousand.
148.5.
145.8. So we don't actually have to count that towards our general fund balance when we start calculating caps and all that stuff. So,
How much of that did we use or agree to use last meeting for the speakers?
Not only just last meeting, how much have we used total, like? What is
so there's 2 different sets of money we're talking about here. We ended up getting $74,000, which I believe we ended up getting like 65 of that because of the amount we share with Academy, because that first set of money had some restrictions and attachments to it. So we got about $65,000 there, plus the $148,000 that we got from the state. So we're looking at over $200,000. As far as what we spent the $48,000 last month on the speaker stuff. And then I believe there's been some cleaning supplies and some other stuff spent on that first round of money. Ballpark where we were on that.
We were over 60,000.
On
Well, we
that.
bought those two hydros.
All those cleaning machines.
Yeah.
How many certified teachers is that, Kevin?
Certified teachers is probably, certified staff members is probably around 30.
And we spent some money on the teachers, paying them to come to that in-services we have
Oh,
in the
the-
summertime.
The non-contract days
Yep.
of summer.
That was some of that.
So then is our tech budget, what do we have left in our tech budget that we haven't used this year? As far as we bought computers and stuff out of there,
So the actual tech budget and
We have
capital outlay stuff
expenditures.
is okay. It'd just be a matter of, it's one of those things you don't have to make a decision right now either. I'm just throwing it out there because I know a lot of other schools are doing it. So I would say, right now, as far as the money we've been allotted, we probably spent close to $100,000 as far as between cleaning supplies and all that junk, plus the speaker stuff last year. So you got a little over half of it left. And then at some point in time, if they ever get their stuff organized out in DC, there'll be another, supposedly there's supposed to be another round of money coming, but, so like I said, if it's something you wanna just sit and wait on to see what happens,
I guess it was up to me, I'd recommend waiting, but that's my thought.
I think I would be in the same boat.
I guess I'd like to see what they come up with in DC before we go ahead and do anything else.
That sounds good.
all right? That is all that I have in my report right now.
Any other questions for Kevin? Thank you, Kevin. Okay, then business items. We got second reading of section G of the Freeman School District Policy Handbook.
Anybody have any questions? Most of the stuff in that section that deals with personnel is all stuff that's dictated by law. There's just some policies that kind of highlight some of that stuff. So, I don't know if anybody had any questions.
Thank you for this lovely large document that I went through today. But,
I am working on trying to get something that's a little more user-friendly for Seth to post on the website, so we can get all that stuff up, but, yeah, it's a lot.
I just had one one thing that stuck out on page 8, if we all have the same page. Most of this deals with employees and stuff like that. There's one under item 7 under page 8, it says refrain from using school employment to promote personal, political, and or religious views. The personal, political, actually, there's another page or 2 pages in page 20 and 21 that talk about what's acceptable politically, what's not. And I thought it did a nice job of kind of breaking that out. But then it just kind of just says refrain from using employment to promote religious views. It's very kind of, there's nothing like it says anything more what people can and can't do. I went on the Department of U.S. of Education, and there was some things like what teachers, administrators, and other school employees can and can't do. And I thought it was a nice thing that they said, stay away from this, but you do have the freedoms to do this. So for myself, I thought if they could expand that a little bit more, because I think faith is important to a lot of people, and they're not always sure what can and can't I do. I can give you this example or something like that, but I thought it would be nice to expand it a little bit so there was a little more info.
So I think what you're looking at there is if you want to start talking about specifics, then you're probably looking at like a separate like regulation that would be tagged with that.
Okay.
So like the policy is meant to be kind of broad.
Okay.
And then underneath the policy, if you have like specifics as far as like, this would include, expand, this would include staying away from this, that, or what, and this is acceptable and that's not acceptable, then that's like a separate, so like, let's see, we got a code, so like the code on this is GBC on that page 7 as far as that staff ethics is concerned.
Okay.
Or if you're on like page, you say 20 or 21?
Yeah, 20 and 21 kind of expand the whole political speech and stuff like that.
So a lot of times what you'll see is, like on page 2, it's GBGA is like your policy, your code number there. So a lot of times what you'll see if you want to have like specifics associated with it, is you'll see a regulation or something like that. So they take the same policy code, so like GBGA, and they go -R.
Okay.
So you know it's specifically associated with that policy. And then when you start talking about like rules and regulations, that's when you get into like the specific stuff that would go with it. So I guess what I would say as far as a recommendation is, I think you guys would have to be okay with it, but like this is okay, but maybe we draft a regulation that goes with that.
Okay.
Based on what you pulled out of the U.S. Department of Education, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I can pass that on later or whatever.
Okay. Any other questions or anything on there? So I would say what we do is if you're okay with this, we approve this, and then we'll start putting together a regulation based on what you're talking about there that would be tagged or linked to that particular policy.
Sounds good.
Okay, then we need a motion to approve the section G of the district policy handbook with the idea of adding those other things on, right, basically?
Yeah. So what we would do the next time around is when we get that regulation, we would just have a reading of that a couple times, and then we would approve that, which would just then get put into that section.
So do we have a motion?
So,
Motion by Cody,
Second,
second by Corey. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Motion to declare bus 8 as surplus. Is it just shot or what?
Yes. Basically, the cost to replace it is, it's not worth it. Plus, when we talked with them out at specialty about it, they said, you know, you can replace this, but a lot of times what we see is if you replace this, then this other thing ends up going out anyway. So basically what we were looking at is, you know, trying to get a little something for it. We kind of looked around to see, basically it's worth scrap is what it's worth, but, you know, so like $500-600 if we can get that for it, is kind of what we were looking at.
Is that just like if somebody wants it first come, or is that like something you can have people if they want, they can
Usually,
make an
so
offer, or if
I think
somebody's
there's a couple ways
interested
we
in-
can do it. You know, we can either just do first come, first served, which is what we do with most of our stuff. I suppose we could, technically, I suppose we could put it in the paper. What have you done for it?
I'd put it in the paper and do a style bid.
kinda guessing somebody sitting here is interested.
I don't want that thing.
Well, how would you best handle that, boss? You know, what would you say?
If they've got somebody that's willing to give me $500, I would take that check and run to the bank as fast as I could, and I think there's somebody that's interested in it. But that's just me.
I mean, otherwise,
bids in
we could do what
$100
Corey
for it.
said, and we could put it in the paper for a couple weeks and just say, we want you to submit your bid by, you know, such and such date, sealed bid on it. I mean, it doesn't matter to me.
Makes me different, I was just kind of asking, sorry.
I don't know, it's tough, because sometimes there's people that all of a sudden are interested and you're not expecting it, and then other people are, you know, the next time there's no one that shows up, and so maybe that's the fairest, that just putting it into a sealed bid thing, and that way, everyone's got a fair shot. I don't know.
Or you hauling up to Christensen and wait.
Yeah.
Well, I
That-
guess that's,
You'd probably get more for scrap metal than you would if you would just give somebody the chance to bid on it.
Maybe throw that into the bids. This is working again.
this is about what our bus was.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, we're sorry, I didn't mean to make it a whole deal. So does anybody have a preference on what we do?
I'd say just scrap it. That way, if there's more than one person interested, we don't ruffle any feathers. And if you're gonna get more scrap in it than you would selling it anyway, you might as well just scrap it.
Sounds fair to me.
Or we can get it out there.
I don't know.
Will they come pick up?
You can pull them with pickup. I pull buses with pickup.
Can now?
You personally, way home. We have a volunteer.
Why don't you just drag that up north to 6th Street with your truck, and you can be the bus driver for that.
There you go. Okay, so then we'll declare it surplus, and if we can get it out to the scrapyard, we'll just take it to the scrapyard. Fair with that? Do we have a motion for that?
So move.
Yes. Motion by Corey. Second?
Cody did. He gave you. I don't want any part of it.
Second by Cody. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, the general fund opt-out request for 2021.
So basically, we were kind of trying to do some forward thinking here a little bit, and it was a little after the fact, but we kind of started thinking about, because you request your opt-out money for the entire calendar year as opposed to the school year. So, you know, basically we requested $500,000 of that latest $600,000 opt-out for this calendar year. So you get $250 in the spring, $250 in the fall. So then for next year, we're gonna go ahead and do the same thing. So we get $250 in the spring of 2021 and $250 in the fall. The issue, well, and it's a good problem to have, for some reason or another, we've been doing pretty good as far as not spending as much as we've anticipated spending in our budgets. So last month when I talked about that general fund cap, our cap is up to about 23%. We want to get as close to 30 as we can. You don't want to go over 30, because if you go over 30, then you run into some state aid issues. So obviously, I think we're going to spend a little bit more this year than we did the year before. But if we're setting ourselves up moving forward, it might be in our best interest to take, we were thinking, instead of taking $500,000 for next year, that we would take $400,000 instead. With the idea that we're getting ourselves in a good position financially, so that hopefully by that last year, the opt-out, we might even be able to request less of that. You know, so what I'm asking is, or what we're kind of recommending is, instead of taking $500,000 of that $600,000 opt-out, we just take $400,000 for next calendar year instead. And we do have to, there's a couple of things that we had to do, because the state wants all that stuff typically approved by October 1st, but they said it is possible for us to go back and make a lesser request. So, you look like you have a question over there.
No, just gears grinding, sorry for the face.
Oh, that's fine. So I believe what we have to do is we just have to say, we probably have to make a motion, right? Debbie, to say that we're gonna take $100,000 less of opt-out money than was originally budgeted. And then we would have to adopt a new budget to reflect, basically the only thing that would reflect is that $100,000 of revenue would not be coming from opt-out money. It would be coming from either what would end up looking like reserve money or a possible capital outlay transfer. But we've had that stuff in our budget for the last few years, and we've never actually had to use it anyway, so that's kind of what we're looking at there.
So, okay, this might be a dumb question, and maybe you said it, but, so on the 30%, we can't go above that at any point in the year? Or if we took 500,000 and we went above and it looked like we were gonna be all right, and we give some back like we did this year, is that?
So
I mean,
what they do to calculate your cap is they look at your lowest, so whatever the lowest balance is, monthly balance is for the entire school year. So typically our lowest month, or the month that we have the least amount of money in the bank, is October. So whatever that number is, that can't be more than 30% of what your expenditures are for the entire year. So what ends up happening is, if we get to the point where we end up requesting too much money and your cap looks like it's going to be above 30%, then you have to either start spending more, like buy a bunch of stuff that maybe you don't necessarily need, or defer that money elsewhere for other purchases. Or if you end up over that 30% cap, then you start losing state aid the next year.
Right, right, but if we give it back, can we give it back so that we're, or not, I suppose technically, like what, this year we gave back, what, $100,000 or whatever we ended up, right?
Right, so instead of taking the full 600,000, we took $500,000.
Right.
And that's what our plan was for next year too, but what we're kind of thinking is, we could give people a little bit of a break and probably take $100,000 less and still be just fine.
Okay.
That you could still take the full $500,000, but then when push comes to shove at the end, you're probably gonna have to figure out what to do with some extra money at the end that we don't really
We can't just say, nah, we didn't need that 100,000.
Not at that point in time.
Not at that, okay. That's what I was
It's
asking.
almost too late now.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
why
I was just gonna say, cause it's nice to have it, but then if we're able to give it back, then, but if we're not able to give it back, then, yeah.
we just think, looking at the numbers, we'd be okay requesting $100,000 less. And either be able to cover it based on where our budget is, or worst case scenario, we could always pull a little from capital outlay if we absolutely had to. But I don't know that that's gonna be, you know, a big deal one way or the other. Just kind of falls in line with trying to be, you know, like, we don't think we really need it, so let's not ask for it from people if we don't have to.
Right.
That's fine by me.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Good with that.
So we probably need to have two motions, right, Debbie? So we just need to have one motion to request $100,000 less in opt-out money for fiscal year 2021. And then we would also need to readopt a budget that would reflect, readopt a budget for 2021, or for this school year. That
You have to readopt, or can you amend it like you do in June?
we could amend it to.
Okay, so first we need a motion for, take $400,000 instead of $500,000 in our opt-out. Is somebody willing to make that motion?
Moved.
Motion by Corey.
Second.
Second by Slade. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries sorry. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. And then we want to amend our budget.
Yeah.
So we amend our budget for 2021.
Paperwork to amend rather than have to
I would assume so.
I think it probably is.
So we would just want to amend the FY '20 budget to reflect $100,000 less in opt-out money, right?
Right, in taxes, $100,000 less in taxes, and then
So we're gonna
I'm gonna
amend it.
put it on the line of, general fund money.
What Deb said. We need a motion.
So moved.
Slade said what Deb said. Second by Corey. Any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. It looks like we're to the point of holding discussion for the winter activity spectator plan, and if you want to get Riley to start us off, Corey, that would be great.
Okay,
How many years are we into the opt-out?
3.
3?
So this will be the end of the 3rd calendar year.
Okay.
So 2021, so we get it all the way through 2021 and all the way through 2022.
Okay.
And then it would be up for,
And then don't we get a half year? Didn't we only get half the first year and then half, so we're only halfway through it, I think.
you know, because
We did a half year.
we got the full year in 2018. Because we passed it in the fall, but we didn't actually get money until the spring. So it's set up on a full calendar year basis there.
I thought we only got half of it for some reason.
We got it for half of the first school year.
By that time, Deb, we won't even need it, huh?
Yeah, that's the plan, huh?
All right.
All right, Riley. Hello. How are you doing?
Good.
All right. The floor is yours.
Okay, well, me and my classmates went over this a couple times, and we talked to our teachers about it, and our teachers agreed with us that, 6th through 8th graders should have a chance to go watch their, classmates play, any sports, because 9th through 12th graders get to, and, we think it's unfair, and everybody agreed to that, because I gave a paper to Mr. Jones of everybody's signature, and pretty much everybody in all grades agreed to it, and most of the grades were like, we've been wanting this for the longest time, because we thought this was unfair too, so, yeah.
All right.
I can attest to that too. I just forgot to bring it to the last board meeting. Fortunately enough, there weren't any junior high events in between, so. They had quite the busy day at lunch one day.
So did you organize this all by yourself?
Yeah, I figured it out, and then my friend Oliver, he helped me talk to all the classes and get it done in class.
Proud dad
And
moment.
I actually took some of my class time off just to do it, and did all my homework.
Does this Oliver person have any ties to the media?
Slightly.
Conflict of interest, I'm gonna have to shoot down.
All right.
Thanks, Riley.
Thanks, Riley.
You did a nice job.
Yes, we appreciate the work.
Yeah, thanks.
So, now I'll kind of follow that up, but we had a conference meeting via Zoom the other day, mostly just to kind of go around the room and see what other schools are considering for the fall, or excuse me, for the winter stuff. I don't know if we really accomplished a whole lot, other than I think the consensus in the room was that, well, the big concern was double headers. How are you gonna keep, for varsity stuff, how are you gonna keep your numbers down during double headers with the potential to have that many people in the gym? I think most of them were kind of on the same page that while they might have had some open attendance stuff for their fall stuff, that they're probably gonna have to do something on some level for winter. The idea of mandating masks at home events came up, or that question came up, are people considering doing that? I think the general consensus there was we would prefer to limit spectators before we would tell people they have to wear masks. That was just what was coming out of that meeting, so. There's a couple different moving parts here, I suppose, with the middle school stuff, like Riley talked about. It was a little different with football and volleyball because most of those kids probably, if they were involved in something else, trying to get to a volleyball, match at 4 in the afternoon might have been a little tough if they were in junior high and some of that other stuff. But now you got, the junior high, they all play on the same night, usually in the same gym. Like when we're here, we're fortunate enough we have different gyms going on, but, I don't know how exactly we want to handle that stuff either, so.
Don't they ride the same bus?
Well, that's another fun issue probably to talk about at some point in time. But yes, typically in the past, they have ridden the same bus. And Debbie just started having nightmares over here thinking about how to transport both of them separately.
Yeah, just there.
So, I guess I don't know, with what we did the back half of the volleyball season as far as the indoor stuff, the nice thing about that was we did limit, I'm gonna go back to it for a second. When we were doing the voucher thing, some of the hangups with the voucher thing were kids were giving their vouchers to students from other schools, so we ended up with a bunch of other kids in the middle of our student section, which seems to be a little problematic with what's going on. The other issue with the voucher thing was some people didn't have enough vouchers for who they wanted to come to the game. But, in hindsight, that's kind of the whole idea of limiting attendance in the first place. One of the other issues that I can see coming up in the winter is going to be when kids are home from college. Right now, we basically said adults can come in, doesn't matter as long as they're not in high school. I don't know that we really want a bunch of college kids sitting in a student section right now. So if they're gonna come, I think we just probably have to be a little strict about what happens in that particular section. But I don't know what you guys are thinking, what you wanna do.
Just when you say the college kids, if they're back, I guarantee you they're hanging out outside of the school building anyway, so. Them sitting in that section, they're already exposed to all of them with whatever else they're doing outside of school. I guess that's my feeling on that, but.
Basketball draws a crowd. It's the one sport that draws a pretty big crowd.
Would agree with you.
girls at least.
Do we have a lot of double headers?
It's what, 6 or 7 probably?
Give me 2 minutes, I'll tell you.
Okay.
And I'm assuming the same format, like the JVs play at the same time? At least at here,
When we're
I
here,
suppose.
yeah. Like I said, I don't know how many home doubleheaders we have.
Not that many home ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
How many are at home? 3 or 4?
4, 3 or 4. Dollars at home. And one exactly in.
There's 10 double headers altogether.
Hanson turned into a doubleheader this year.
Double-digit double-headers.
Probably 3 or 4 at home.
So here's gonna be, I think, what I'm gonna say, and so I think, so like, just like the 6th through 7th through and 8th graders are all gonna practice together. I think last year, if I remember right, we had, for girls anyway, it was 3rd through 6th, maybe 7th practicing together. And so like, if we go, like we kind of, okay, so I'm gonna combine kind of 2 of these things, and so like a little bit of, I'm gonna combine 5 and 6 a little bit. Some of the parent concern I've gotten this week is that that every kid was considered a close contact 5 through 9. And I would have to tend to agree, I can't believe that every kid was within 15 minutes of the teacher. And so if we're gonna just kind of go to the wholesale, kick everybody out 5 through 9, which I told you when we were in yellow, I will support, I'm not opposed to that. Part of me feels like at this point, like, just open it up and whoever wants to go goes. I like, especially if we're gonna have 3rd through 6th or 7th boys and girls practicing together, like, we're gonna quarantine, I mean, those kids are potentially gonna be all quarantined anyway. Like, you know, does that make sense? Like,
Well, I think that's gonna be another issue, if they're all gonna be practicing together. I mean, so, and like, kinda going back to what you were talking about with the college kids and some of that stuff, like, I get outside of the building, we can't control what people are gonna do. We're just looking at as far as, and we get the same question from kids during the day when we're trying to tell them we wanna do this, that, and everything else, is we're just trying to minimize, mitigate, control what we can actually control. So like, I get these kids might be hanging out with each other outside of school, and I guess, you know, what we've tried to been conveying to people all along is we'd like you to kind of minimize that, but we all are realistic and know that that's not gonna happen. But I think just to completely throw everything aside and say, you know, we're just not gonna do anything in here because they're gonna be with the other outside is tough for me to buy into. Now, obviously, it's not my decision, so, you know, now as far as like, we're, you know, taking 5 through 9 out of the building. Now, there were some exceptions to that, but they were kids that weren't in those classrooms in question. Now, the tough part for us when we were sitting down trying to figure that out was, you know, like I said, looking at the the teacher does a fantastic job in that classroom. And part of the thing that makes them as good as they are is the fact that they're around the room, they're engaging with kids. It's a lot different than somebody just sitting up in the front of the room and not moving for the whole time. So, as far as what you're saying, and I've had other people, you know, kind of talk to me about it, and I said, you know what, you're 100% right. I would guess there's probably some kids in that room that didn't have the actual 15 minutes, even if you're talking about cumulative time over that 24 hours with that teacher. However, you know, we had to consider some other things as far as, the room and, if I'm working one-on-one with a kid. I remember when I used to teach math, and we were talking about this earlier today, if I have a kid right here working with me and I have it, I have a hard time not considering that kid to be a close contact, even if I'm only up there for 2 or 3 minutes. So, I mean, we could go on and on about this. I think the tough part is it's just, the definition makes it very, very difficult to be able to rule kids out as a close contact. And I know that's not necessarily what people want to hear as far as, well, and my explanation to them was we couldn't justify ruling kids out as close contacts based on the information we had. And so I get it. Shane and I talked a lot about, even if we were able to start picking and choosing kids as far as like you are or you're not, that's going to cause a lot of problems on our end too. But either way, I don't think it would have changed what our instructional plan would be for the next, at least this week. And obviously some of that might change tonight if we decide to do something different. But if we have a teacher that ends up testing positive, is engaged with kids as much as they are there, I'd rather err on the safe side and just say, we're going to go remote for a little bit. If it's a kid, on the other hand, okay, maybe we can come up with some ways to not do something on such a large scale there. But, since that time, whether they're related or not, we've had another, kid test positive, staff member test positive. We have another staff member that's, has a pending test out and some of that stuff. So either way, I think number 6 is going to dictate a lot about where we go from here as far as some of that stuff goes.
Well, right, and then then what I would say, and so I've thought about this, and I know you and I have had this conversation, and I've thought about it a lot. And like, when we went to yellow, like we just did yellow for the school, and we didn't do it for sporting events.
Right.
And so like, my issue is kind of like, we're just kind of picking and choosing where we want to be. And we had this conversation, and so like, to me, it's like, well, I mean, like, it's more, if they feel comfortable coming, then let it come. If, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm okay. I mean, at the same time, I'm okay if it wants to go to 6th grade but like I say, if it's all the way down to 3rd practicing, it's pretty tough to, like.
And I'll say, as far as that conversation we had about when we went to yellow and we didn't do it for the spectator stuff, I'll take the blame for that. And that was just kind of, I think, in hindsight. Originally, I thought it's a great idea. Let's align them together. We go yellow in the school, we go yellow in there. Well, that was, and I know Shane and I talked about it a lot. That was not a very good idea or a recommendation on my part, because they're two separate things.
Your spectators should go on your state and county numbers, maybe not necessarily the town numbers. I mean, when you look at our county and our state numbers,
So,
you shouldn't, I mean, that.
and you and I have had the conversation multiple times about consistency, with whatever it is that we're gonna do. I guess in hindsight, as far as the spectator thing, I just assumed there'd be a lot more people upset about changing that than there would be our adjustments to the school side of it. So that was kind of why we.
I understand there are going to be people upset, and there's going to be people upset about this whole, I mean, no matter what we do, there's people upset on the whole thing. And so like, like when I, whatever we talked with you and I said, whatever, it is what it is at that point. But like, like there again, like, it just, I think it was a bad look maybe. How about, you know what I mean? Like, that it was just not, and like you said, maybe we set it up poorly or whatever, but,
Well, I'll take the blame for that, because that was the way that I kind of recommended it to you, so that's fine. But I don't, like I said, number 5, as far as spectators,
So I guess
whatever you guys want to do.
I think we're kind of comparing apples to oranges here. So students in school, that's mandatory. If you're of that age group, unless you're homeschooling or you go to private school, you have to come to school, or the sheriff's going to come to your house and say, hey, your kids need to be at school. So from that standpoint, with it being mandatory to be here, there's a huge spectrum of how seriously people are taking this whole thing, from not very to very, and we need to respect that whole spectrum and take the necessary precautions. On the flip side, that's the apples. On the oranges side, everything that goes on in that gymnasium from a sports point of view is voluntary. The student athletes all volunteer to play those sports. Everybody in the stands volunteers to come watch those games. They've done the risk versus reward, and they've decided it's worth the risk to come to this game or to play on that court. So to tell people that they can't do that now, I think is different than, you know, having rules in classrooms and in the school. They're two totally different things. I mean, you know, now we're in code yellow with what's going on in school. I don't necessarily agree with that when it's completely voluntary with sports. If people want to come, that's on them. That's fine. So I guess that's where I stand on that one. Two different things, two different scenarios, two different strategies.
The only thing I would follow that up with is that if you're considering just opening it up to anybody, that we keep the elementary and the middle school kids on it. For fear of disrupting, particularly the elementary kids at a high school event. Just because I think that has the potential to create more issues on that end of the building. Would you agree, Shane?
If that's what we're gonna do, I don't wanna be there supervising either. I mean, I'm choosing not to go to my daughter's activities because of COVID. I surely don't wanna come to our gym with 1,000 people walking around here because of COVID. Elementary kids, yeah, this is problematic. I mean, it's probably, I mean, if you look at our state numbers, it's pretty problematic to fill our gym full of people in the middle of the winter.
Well, and I get, that would be another thing to consider, like, kind of going back to your argument there as far as kids not having the choice during the school day compared to that being voluntary, you know, would be, you know, we have to have somebody there to supervise. And that's not really something that's voluntary, like when it's Shane's night to, you know, he sets up the schedule for that at the beginning of the year, and we split it up between myself, him, Mr. Maskey, and Mrs. Sage. You know, and when it's our time to be on there, like, we're required by the state to have
Yep, that's a valid point.
a supervisor there, so like, I don't wanna put, and I'm probably right there with you on that. I mean,
I'm skipping family weddings because I'm trying to stay COVID free. I don't wanna be here if this gym's full of people either.
so, I mean, you're exactly right. It's kind of like when the Activity Association came out with their winter rules or their guidelines for how it's gonna work. You read through them and it's like, really? You spent all the time doing, like, it's all window dressing. You know, what are basically the two primary things that you can do to try to prevent somebody from getting? You can stay away from them, you can put on a mask. Well, there ain't any of that in that winter stuff. It's like, well, we're gonna wipe down this and we're gonna wipe down that, and we're not gonna shake hands after the game. It's like, if somebody's on the fence about playing, it's like, okay, I'm gonna read through these guidelines. Oh, I've decided I'm gonna play basketball because we're not gonna shake hands after the game. Or if I'm a wrestler, oh, you know, I'm not sure, but I decided I'm gonna wrestle because I have to wipe down my headgear after. I mean, come on, there's risk for everybody involved. And it'd be nice if they would just call it what it is. You know what I mean? You decide you're gonna play, you're assuming some type of risk for wanting to do that. You know, I guess on the bigger picture, as far as kids outside of that, we're just trying to, you know, minimize risk for our kids and our staff. So, and I get the whole, you know, we've been down this path before. We've had this conversation about people should have the right to make their own choice about whether they come in, so on and so forth. You know, just understand that when we talk about it from the gym perspective and the games and stuff, that there are still some other people that, you know, don't necessarily have the option to get away from that, even if they would like to make that choice. So,
Is there a way to fix that?
I mean, as far as having one of us decide that they're just gonna,
I'm not saying to make it mandatory that somebody else takes their place. Is there some sort of volunteer system that we could say, hey, things are a little weird, or there's some of you that aren't as concerned about this that would be willing to supervise more events? I mean, yeah, I'm not trying to force my will on anybody, obviously. If you're more, you know, if you're that concerned, I don't want you doing that then. But there might be somebody on the flip side that would be okay with watching or supervising another game.
And part of my safety has been to try to keep it out of the elementary building too.
Sure.
I mean, the issue is that it needs to be you know, it needs to be an actual administrator, that's the one there.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, you kind of have a limited pool as far as, you know, what that's gonna be, or who that's gonna be, so.
Makes sense.
And I don't know if we need to do any colors anymore or whatever, but I would agree that opening it up more and letting people choose, especially the middle school kids, I felt like they really missed out. I think the middle school kids are the ones that look up and build for the future because of what they see. And I felt like there was a big hole there. And they're around the kids anyway every day if you have middle school, high school in the same hallways here. Elementary, I could see, you know, maybe if you just let the relatives in, or the brothers, sisters, but, and I don't know, maybe we should have, not necessarily colors, but maybe a second level, if things get so bad, then we just go parents only, kind of as, if they go to that level. But, I don't know, I really think we probably need to open it up. After going to all these other gyms and other towns not having that, it's hard to see our spectators have to go to other people's gyms in order to take a game in. That's just my perspective.
No, I think I mean, you're gonna see restrictions at other places for the winter stuff. I don't know exactly what they're gonna be, but, I mean, you're gonna see that more so. Most of the people in the fall that stayed away from restrictions for volleyball did so because they don't typically draw crowds for that stuff, so. But I would be willing to bet that you're gonna see some type of restriction as far as the number of people that a kid can have come. Now, whether that's gonna be they get 6 tickets and they get to do that, you know, I don't know exactly, but that was just the consensus that I walked away from that conference meeting with the other day.
So we are gonna ultimately need a motion, correct?
Yeah, so whatever you want your plan to be.
Does anybody have a motion that they would like to make? Or one that they want to throw out that we can pick and start going from there?
Cody, you have any thoughts? Or Corey?
It's fine for me to open it up, but whatever you guys wanna discuss or do is fine too.
I know Riley's thing was that, you know, they weren't allowed to watch the girls that they go to school with, who watch them in volleyball. And, you know, now with this thing going ahead with, I don't know what we're gonna do with that age group 6th through 8th. Are we gonna send them on different buses, since they usually, you know, they're gonna be playing at the same time. If there's 2 gyms available, there's gonna be a boys game and a girls game going on each side. However, there's gonna be some schools that only have one gym, and so are you gonna say, well, those boys can't go in there and watch the girls play, or those girls can't go watch the boys play? Especially in Freeman, I guess in Freeman we would have two gyms, so you're gonna have the, you know, 6th and 7th playing in one gym, and 6th and 7th playing in the other gym, and the 8th on the other side, or however it's gonna go. So, and these kids are basically hanging out with the high schoolers all day long. I mean, they're intermingling. I don't know. I just don't think, you know, that they shouldn't be allowed to come watch these kids play. I don't know how much, how many more games we would go to, but.
I don't know that the middle school and high school intermingle that much during the day though. I mean, we got separate hallways, and yeah, they have to pass each other in the hallway. mean, I think if you're gonna make the argument, you could say that if middle school kids wanna go to the middle school stuff, that's fine. I just think you start bringing middle school kids to a high school event, if they're not siblings, and you have them sitting over there, we're gonna have, the middle school kids don't keep their hands off of each other. It's, but, you know. But whatever you guys decide to do is what we're gonna enforce, so. Or not enforce, I guess, whichever way we say.
Okay, out of curiosity, how many games do we have before our next school board meeting?
Well, you have the entire junior high season's gonna take place before your next.
Well, right, but the high school is going to be.
Right, going to the next board meeting?
December 11th,
14th.
14th.
One game. Actually, we have a home game that night, I think. I think we have a home game that one day. Or we have a game that day.
It's in Mitchell, isn't that the Corn Palace game?
Yeah, so there's a boys game that, but we don't have any home games. There's Viper Curly home. Viper Curly's home on the Friday the 11th.
How many would we have before January?
Another like 5 games. I don't know if they're home games, but another like 5 games. Home games. Canastota is home, and Irene Wakanda is home before our next board meeting, and Bridgewater Emory's home, so we have 3.
3 total before January board meeting.
4 in one.
In the
Four
water,
total.
4 total.
4 total before our January board meeting, home games. 2 of which are doubleheaders.
Right.
I got a feeling we're gonna be seeing restrictions in the next 45 days anyway, the way this stuff spreads. It's gonna be whatever. And if we do allow it to happen, we open it up, let people come, I still think either way, I think it's gonna happen, and we're gonna see restrictions in the next 30 to 45 days. It'll be like,
So even though I am fully in favor of consistency,
You can be inconsistent.
I'm thinking I want to be inconsistent and go with a 4-game trial and reassess this in January. If we even make it that far as, like Corey says, if we go 30 days or whatever, and who knows what happens then. And if in those 4 games it is completely packed and we're like, yeah, that's too much, then we back it off. I kind of agree with Slade, it is all optional, and if they will want to go, let them try it. And I think even after the first game, if it's pretty packed, I think you'll see a lot of people just say, maybe we won't, but.
So we've already proven on this side of the building that going remote is, we can make it work, right? Okay, so I don't have less of a concern. I think right now with everything that's going on, we should really be considering limiting, just because everything's just going crazy right now. But, okay. We've proven at this side of the building that we are capable of going fully remote and not really having a whole lot of drop off as far as what the quality of instruction is.
I think you can say that all the way down to 5th grade.
Okay, so 5th through 12th, okay? They're not in the building, we could still make it work. And the reason I'm bringing that up is I think, you're gonna run the risk of knocking some of the, more kids out for extended periods of time, just because they're gonna be, if you say everybody 5 through 12 can come to a game, now you've just created more exposure for all those kids. Okay, fine, we just have to understand that if we do that, the remote thing's probably gonna come into play. Fine. I think K through 4 is a little bit of a different story. Like I said, 4th grade's managing fine the way they are right now, but, it's a little different than when we have 5th through 12th just running their regular schedule during the day where they're meeting every class and we don't have them, with packets where they have a half hour to hour time period where they, get to ask questions about some of that stuff. So, I would make the argument that if you really want to keep your K through 4 in the building, I just don't know, other than siblings, that we would want to open it up to them. Does that make sense?
K through 4 or 5.
K through 4, I think 5th grade, I mean, like 5th grade this last week, they've been joining remotely, they've been going with their normal schedule. We're not missing any, subjects or anything like that. That's so far, and I would assume it's only gonna get better once we kind of get a little more accustomed to it. So, I guess you wanna go 5 through 12. You're not gonna put any restrictions on 5 through 12, I mean, if that's what you're thinking, but I just,
I wanted to correct myself, 16th, I think the girls. I didn't have the girls in there too. So
No.
I was counting double headers.
So just administration supervises games. We don't have like a rotation of teachers that are doing that as well?
like I said, I believe the state, the Activities Association, that was one of the rules they passed last year, like you have to have a game administrator there.
Gonna get you like a drone with a camera and a voice recording. All right.
I guess for me, I like the idea of opening it up, and if we want to keep K through 4 out, unless they have a brother or sister playing, give them a special ticket or something. Try it for the time being, see how it goes. I guess that's what I'm thinking, but.
Are you wanting to make a motion?
Yes, I'll do that. Okay, so we'll open it up. You talked about a trial period. You just want to, that'll be our own little lot, or do you want to put it into the motion?
Well, I mean,
I
if
think
we do a
maybe-
trial period, we can also see, I mean, then we'll know what other schools are doing too, and what is working or isn't working on their end too, I mean.
So we won't put a certain time on it.
No,
Well, okay, we'll just say open it up, except for grades K through 4, unless they have a.
So are you gonna allow kids that are not in school, younger than kindergarten to come to then? So the only restriction you're placing on
Oh,
kids is K through 4? Or are you just gonna say anybody that's less than, younger than 5th grade?
well, any kids younger than that probably wouldn't affect, or would they? I mean,
I don't know the answer to that.
all right, we'll just say K through 4. And unless they have a brother or sister playing.
Okay, so.
Am I missing something?
I whispered, no, you're good. Okay, so we've got a motion, Mark made a motion that we're gonna allow everybody not K through 4
Okay,
the ability to come.
so that would include like kids out of school that are younger, okay.
Unless they have a brother or sister playing.
So okay.
Okay, I think so, that's our motion, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Motion by Mark, second by Cody.
Okay, so just to clarify, I just want to make sure that on the same page as everybody. So there's no, essentially the only restrictions are if you are a student in K through 4, you cannot attend home events. Okay. The exception being if you have a sibling.
So at a varsity game would be a varsity player or somebody that dressed varsity. at a
Okay.
junior high.
So like we have double headers and all that stuff. So this is also gonna be in effect for the middle school stuff. So anybody 5 through 12 and adults can attend middle school stuff as well.
Correct.
Okay. I just wanna make sure I'm understanding what.
Right. And then obviously right, that's the way you're saying it, I'm assuming, right? And then
So then if you're a sibling of a junior high kid at a junior high event, you would be able to attend as well,
Correct.
if you're in K through 4.
Correct. All right. Any other discussion? Do you guys want a roll call vote of this, or do we just good?
I think we got 5.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0.
So Kyle, I got a question then. Am I required to supervise? I'm supposed to require the supervisor by the early game, and I will guarantee you they will bring 800 people just themselves. And I don't want to be in the gym in the wintertime, people like that.
How many?
Can you feel comfortable, like, having your distance?
It's pretty hard to distance with that many people in the building in this small of area.
Are you saying you'd be willing to go do a different game, just not the live or Curly one?
If our gym's full of people in the heat of the way our state numbers are, I don't want to be here.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of sitting in the same boat that he is. I mean, I guess we're gonna have to figure it out one way or the other, but I think I think you and I have a bulk of the basketball stuff this year because I'm not coaching anymore and you did most of the volleyball stuff,
I
so.
most of the volleyball, but
I
I'm not
just-
doing basketball, I'm coaching it, so I'm already.
It makes me a little uneasy, I guess, to do that. But
I mean,
I don't know what the alternative
basketball
is.
games. I don't, because I didn't feel comfortable. I don't feel comfortable coming to these games either.
Okay, what are the, so you have to,
How much interaction do you both have with everybody that's coming into this gym?
what are your responsibilities for the, I mean, obviously, if somebody gets rowdy, you gotta kick them out or whatever. Like,
Right, well, I mean, basically, you're pretty much supervising everything that's going on in the gym, so, I mean, you know, we can't just sit out here. I mean, even if you sit out here, everybody that comes in is gonna be, like, I mean, I just don't know where.
Is that something you could do from the camera system in the office?
I mean, you need to actively have somebody there. I mean,
essentially, at boys' games, we would essentially have somebody there.
but the
But
administrator
even-
from the state can't be a coach. Like, so there's like this checklist of things that you have to go through now prior to the game starting with like the coaching. It has to be, you know, who's the, you know, like, do you have a trainer on site, you know, who's your game supervisor, blah, 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 all that stuff. My understanding is your game supervisor can't actually be a coach that's in the game.
Right, because if someone's getting rowdy in the stands, I can't stop the middle of my game, the coach can call timeout, so I.
Well, no, I understand that. And my point was more that, like, there's still somebody physically there, even though they're not technically like.
Can I take your place?
Right, I would be more than willing to do
But
it too. if
since
that's-
I'm a school board member, is that close enough? Can I?
It needs to be an administrator.
I mean, because, so,
Well, we're just gonna, I mean, we're just gonna have to go
Because if
with it.
something happens, you gotta go down.
We're just gonna go with it. I mean, we're just gonna have to figure it out, I guess.
I mean, I skipped a big family wedding.
right,
Relatives mad at me because I didn't go to the wedding because I didn't feel comfortable going.
right. Is that, so I'm gonna assume that you're not the only two administrators in the state that feel that way. Is there a way of asking, like, because of COVID, because they're making all kinds of concessions for COVID anyway, is there a way of asking if you can have somebody else that is willing to do it, be there to be the administrator? And like, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you don't feel comfortable, I don't want to make you do it. At the same time, like, I want the kids to be able to play the game. At the same time, I
Takes
think
the
the fans
voluntary
should be.
thing out of that argument.
Well, no, I know.
Yeah.
And as crappy as that is, like, not that my job is maybe not as in contact with people for as long, but like, there are things I have to do that even if I mean, if I did feel comfortable with it, you know what I mean? Like, but I still have to do, but I don't want to force you to do anything. But I would like to, if there's a way that the state is willing to let people help, if that's an option. Because, you know what I mean?
I don't know the answer to that question.
I mean, is it,
I guess I just don't know. I guess we'll just have to figure it out.
And maybe there's a way that, you know,
Maybe
when people are sitting down and, you know, a person could float across, and if you want somebody like myself to say, hey, can you go over there and tell those people, I'd be more than willing to do that. But you're still in charge, and I'm just the messenger. So whatever we can do, I'd sure be willing to help. The thing that I saw that was interesting is when it came to volleyball, last year our biggest game was when we went the game before the Sweet 16. The gym was packed. This year, it was very, very limited. And so numbers wise compared from one year to the next. So I think what we were saying before where people are starting to say, I don't think I want to, I think that's happening already. And so, I don't know, we'll probably see, and we can adjust over time here, but yeah.
and maybe it's not, I mean, question, Shane, at what point would you feel comfortable doing? Like, what's your, like,
Do I want to be in the?
you want to be there none, right?
Right.
Right, okay, so I mean, it's not that we're allowing a bunch of people in here, if we were just, everybody had 4 tickets, you'd prefer not to do it anyway.
If there was 4 tickets and you had limited space and it was spaced out, I mean, I just know what basketball brings. You're gonna have crowds.
Right, yeah. I understand, I mean, I understand.
If I'm careful in my personal life, I should be able to be careful in my work life.
I agree. And like Mark said, if there is something we're able to work or help, I'm more than willing to, and we'll figure it out.
And part of my carefulness is so I can continue to do my job at the other end of the building throughout the year.
All right. Number 6 then, the school exclusion for students are designated as close contacts of COVID-19. And I think you had kind of brought something up on this last month, I think. And I guess, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe you could go through the process of you put out this letter and maybe just so everybody kind of knows, I've got a lot of questions about how does this work, what's it look like in real experience. Maybe you want to run through one of the experiences we've had without names or something. But I think just so people kind of have an idea.
Well, I kind of did that when I went through my report to begin with. I mean, I was reading right off of that sheet as far as how to do that.
Okay.
So, I mean, basically when we get a case in the building, Shane, myself, Will, and Josh are usually the ones that sit down and we try to figure out what we're gonna do. And obviously, we consult with the teacher on trying to figure that out. Trying to figure out cumulatively over the course of 24 hours whether somebody was exposed for 15 minutes is not necessarily an exact science. Like I said, when we kind of sat down and looked at this, we had a real difficult time in the most recent scenario of being able to rule people out as being close contacts just because of, everything, the dynamic involved with that specific classroom or those classrooms. Now, like I said before, even if we were able to definitively determine that less people would have been close contacts, I don't know that it was going to change what our instructional approach for at least this week was going to be, as far as trying to get everybody, in those classes out of the building if possible. Like I mentioned before, when we get a positive case, we talk with the Department of Health about the scenario, but then we go through and we have to try to figure out all the contact tracing stuff ourselves. And then we have this giant Excel workbook that we have to fill out all the information as far as people that were close contacts and the positive case. We submit that to the Department of Health. If they have any questions on it, they call me, and we discuss more what's on there. And then basically they move forward with contacting or not contacting people that are, either the positive case or the close contacts and all that stuff. So, like I said at the beginning, we need to focus more on when we're telling people the school exclusion part, not necessarily the quarantine part, because it is the Department of Health that's supposed to determine who quarantines. However, we're actually the ones that are determining that for them. So, in the interest of trying to keep people, safe and get them informed as soon as possible, that's kind of why we've made reference to the quarantine stuff before. Because, like I said, what we've seen, and that, superintendents from other schools have seen this all over the place too, is the Department of Health can't keep up. They're having a hard enough time contacting people about positive cases, let alone, who was around them or considered a close contact. So the lag time, between all that stuff has been, pretty rough. I'll use as an example, we had a student a couple weeks ago that tested positive, and I believe it was on like a Wednesday. I didn't actually get contacted by the Department of Health until the following Tuesday. And that was just in regards to the positive case. So at that point in time, they still hadn't even contacted anybody about being in contact.
I was gonna say for Remy and Forth, I think she didn't get contacted for almost a week. I mean, we were almost a week out. And this is gonna have a question. And so like, talking about exclusion as opposed to quarantine, are you recommending to the state that it is just like every kid is just excluded, or every kid is a close contact?
So when we send, the information we send to the state is only of the kids that would be considered close contacts.
So, okay, so for example, and just asking, just for clarification, so like 5th to 9th, and I don't know how many, so how many kids were close contact and how many are just excluded from school?
They're all the same.
In this case, they're all the same.
The state.
Well, right, I understand that, but like, okay, for instance, you're saying like, we have to just say that we're in exclusion. So like, but what somebody does outside of school, they are still able to go and do stuff. How do you know?
Well, we don't have, so in the most recent scenario, we just sat down and said, if you were a kid in that grade span, and you were in the classroom with that teacher
For 2 hours.
we're considering you to be a close contact, okay? So from there, the dialogue from us should be, as a result of that, and a result of what our policy is, you're gonna be excluded from school and school activities for 14 days. The Department of Health will then contact you to inform you that you are a close contact and that you should quarantine for 14 days.
So essentially, it's one and the same.
It is.
I mean, it's right, so there's no difference, so whether we.
So that's what we're doing is, we're excluding kids from school based on determining that they're a close contact. So like this situation is kind of unique in that, okay, say we had went through and we were able to prove that, 10 kids were not close contacts. Technically, they could have kept coming to school, but based on the scenario in front of us, we were probably still gonna go remote with those grades anyway.
Right.
So, I mean, there could be another scenario that pops up where we have, maybe it's the same group of kids, but a different teacher. And we're able to definitively prove, I think it's only like the 8 kids that sit in the first 2 rows of the classroom, okay? They're close contacts. We're gonna ask them to be, they're gonna be excluded from school for the 14 days. We're gonna report those names to the Department of Health, basically telling the Department of Health they're close contacts. The Department of Health is then gonna contact them and tell them to quarantine. The issue being that it might be a week after the fact before they actually.
Right, and so I'm not arguing, I'm just asking like clarification. So like, if you did in that scenario, you did 8 kids, but then you sent all the other kids home remote learning because of?
Well, we would have to figure out at that point in time whether it still made sense, like, okay, you know, we know these kids are close contacts for sure. Based on everything else we know, does it make sense to try to stick with half of the kids in the building still learning and half of them out? Or do we just say, even though half of you aren't close contacts, we're still gonna go remote? And then those kids that aren't close contacts could still participate in activities or, you know, one of those types.
He's using an example, he's not using the.
No, I know, I understand, I'm just saying, like, I just had, like, I've had a few parents contact me and they're like, there was no way my kid was within that time frame.
How
And
do
I,
they know that?
well, right, I'm just
Yeah.
saying, like, so so my question then is, so if you're going remote, and we're going remote because of close contacts, we're telling just those 8 people that they're then close contact in our situation, and everybody else is just remote, and they're like,
As more of a precaution at that point.
right, and there is so what I'm asking, is there a difference in what you tell potentially 8 kids and 8 kids? You know, do you understand my question? So
Yeah.
like, that family doesn't have to quarantine, but they're still out of school.
Right. So basically, if you had a scenario where like half the class was close contact and the other half was not, you know, obviously the ones that are close contacts, we'd say, you know, you're gonna have to stay out of school, so on and so forth. We very well could continue with the other half in person, at which point we really wouldn't tell them anything, other than, you know, we had a positive case in the room. There's been a number of people in the room that have been designated as close contacts. We recommend monitoring for symptoms. So just be aware that that's going on. We've decided at this point in time that we're still gonna continue in-person instruction with these kids, you know, so on and so forth.
Mostly I'm asking just because of the delay with the high school, with the
Yep.
state,
Yep.
is like that in, like even in a situation we had, see, every kid was determined close contact, but had there been a kid that was not
Well,
determined.
technically, there was probably a handful of kids in those grades that were not considered close contacts.
They weren't in that class.
And we took the opposite.
Well, I mean,
approach.
but I mean the ones that were in school,
Right.
you know what I mean? And so like, if they were determined that they weren't a close contact, you would have then told them, you're still going remote learning, you're not a close contact,
Correct.
you don't have to worry about
Correct.
quarantine.
And like,
But we just are, that's what we're doing.
Right.
Like, that's what I'm asking,
and
that's
say
all.
for like example, in that scenario, if we had, you know, 10 kids that weren't, and we didn't cancel all our junior high stuff for the week, like, you could still participate in junior high practice if you want to, even though we're gonna be learning remotely. It's kind of like what we did with the high school, like, you have the option to go home. You're not going home because you're a close contact, you're going home because you're taking precautions. So long as you log into each of your class every day when you take attendance, you're allowed to participate in activities, you know, after the fact.
Right.
That's probably a good question for this week, because I think people are saying, can I go to the volleyball game, and can I go to the football game?
Right.
And that's where I think people are saying, do I have to stay home in quarantine, or can I go to that? And I think that's where a lot of questions are coming from.
And my response
If the
is,
state quarantines you, there's no law that says you can't go do what you want, 'cause there's people that do it.
and
But could they come to
Well,
like
I
a
mean-
home game?
so.
But that would be,
So here's the deal on that. Okay, there's which I think I included in there, there's a state statute that allows the board or the superintendent to exclude kids from school after consulting with health officials, which in this case, the health official is the Department of Health. Okay, so if we exclude them from school, you know, and this doesn't, you know, whether we're excluding right now because we're considering them close contacts, whatever the scenario is, we exclude them from school activities. The whole idea is, whether they hear from the Department of Health or not, we're asking them to stay away from school and also stay away from school activities. Now, I had this same conversation with a parent the other day, and I said, now, I will tell you that we're asking you to keep your child away from school activities for the next, 14 days. I'm hoping that you'll respect why we're asking you to do that. However, if you choose to send your kid to a, volleyball, or you choose to send them to the Dome on Thursday, or whatever, the football game last Friday was what we were talking about specifically, I'm not gonna chase you down and confront you and tell you your kid has to leave. There are, the quote that I've had is, there are 50 other hills for me to die on right now. That's not gonna be the one. You know what I mean?
Right, no, right,
And you know what that's gonna turn into is if you do is, well, I'm not leaving, you can't make me, so then what are we gonna have to do? Call law enforcement to have them escorted out of the building because technically they're not supposed
But
to
if
do
it was a
it?
home activity, we can exclude them.
Right. Well, I mean, technically, if it's an activity that we're involved in anywhere, we should be able to exclude them, but, you know, like I said, that's kind of the thing there. I mean, I don't, you know, like I said, as much as I'd like to, you know, err on the side of safety and all that stuff, I don't know that I'm interested in, you know, Slade decides he's gonna bring his daughter to the football game on Thursday or whatever it happens to be, and I know that we've excluded her from whatever it happens to be. I don't know that I'm gonna go up to Slade and say, hey, by the way, you need to get her out of here right now or else, because.
Because I'm bigger than you.
Right.
Well, I mean, okay, you're saying something else.
Well, exactly. You're bigger than I am, and that's not gonna end well for me. So, I mean, a lot of this, it's kind of the same thing when we talked at the conference the other day about if you're gonna mandate masks for home events. You're gonna mandate it, great. If somebody doesn't do it, what are you gonna do about it?
right.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of, you're trusting people to do the right thing because you're asking them to do it. At the end of the day, if they don't do it, I mean, I just don't know that there's anybody in this room that really wants to go down that path of making somebody do that if they don't really want, you know what I mean?
Right. Maybe when I go back, I think most of my questions were on the tracing. What's the process that you guys use for the tracing?
So the four of us get together, right? Me, you, Josh, and Will. Sit down, we take a look at everything that's going on in that room, what the teacher does, what the teacher tells us, all that stuff, and we try to figure out if we can, you know, basically we kind of start with the assumption that they're in a room for, you know, we're in there, most of them were in the room for 2 hours over the course of that 2-day period.
Some were 4.
Some were 4 because they have some homeroom stuff and that. Okay,
Oh,
so,
hold on, now, why 2 days?
because you have to look at 2 days prior to the person.
Oh, I thought it went 24 hours. I thought it was 15 minutes into 24 hours.
Well, it is 15 minutes and it's 24 hours.
2 days
But we have
after
to
the
look at
positive test.
We have to look at 2 days prior to the person showing symptoms. So there's 2 days that are actually in question. Now,
Okay, okay.
it would have to be 15 minutes over the first 24-hour period or 15 over the
Okay.
second. You know, and like Shane was saying, there's some instances where a Griddle is actually in that room for more than 1 hour a day. So, like I said, when we went through and looked at it, it wasn't as simple, well, not that it was simple before, but when it was, you know, 15 consecutive minutes, okay, that was a little bit easier to start picking and choosing who, you know, because you can tell, like, okay, seating charts, all that stuff. And it becomes more complicated when it's a teacher, because of, you know, that whole side of things.
Don't you just talk to the teacher and say, tell me, where have you stayed?
Mark, you teach 90 to 100 kids through an 8-period day, you're not gonna remember every kid you talk to for 2.
Well, if you're gonna be around a kid for 15 minutes, that's gonna be a rare thing.
It's cumulative now, though.
Right, in 24 hours. And these kids that, like in our last situation, they are moving from classroom to classroom. And unless this teacher is right there, most of the time I'm assuming they're gonna be at the board, distance from the kids. Is that correct?
That's part of our decision on this was her teaching style.
Mm-hmm.
She's not your normal teacher. I mean, she was a teacher that sat at the front.
So did you guys talk to her and ask her, or how did you go about it?
We've all been in her classroom to see how she.
Yes, I had a conversation with her about it.
Okay, the thing I don't understand is that I called her myself today. I said, tell me, how did everything go? I said, did someone talk to you? She said, I had the test, and then I was sent home. And I said, well, then you probably had someone talk to you. She goes, no, I didn't have anybody talk to me. And I said, so, well, okay, and I said, you probably had some kind of like a recollection of your last 2 days because she was tested on Tuesday. So it'd be basically some of Tuesday and back to Monday. And so I said, well, tell me kind of how you teach. And she said, typical 50-minute day or 50-minute period. I spend 30 to 35 of that up at the board. So I said, how far are you away from the kids? And she said, my closest kid is probably right at 6 feet. And then I said, okay, then so tell me about the rest of your time. And then she said, well then, I put on my mask, and then I go up and down and ask any questions. But she said the most I would ever stop at one kid is for 2 minutes. That would be the longest. Otherwise, I'm constantly moving, and then at the end of that, 15 minutes of walking up and down, then I'm done. And then I go on to the next class. So I said, of those 2 days, how many did you have where you were within 6 feet, or 6 feet for more than 15 minutes? And she goes, I don't know if I really had any. So I'm just questioning how it just seemed a little much to have grades 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 all gone. And maybe I just don't understand the process, but I just thought it just seemed a little aggressive.
So the conversation that I had with the teacher after the fact was, I couldn't tell you specifically who asked questions over that 2-day period. They're up and around the room, I get it. Like we said, I don't know, it's impossible to be able to tell if somebody was next to him for 15 minutes. The choice that we were left with was, okay, well,
We rule somebody out.
here's the deal, can we rule somebody out? Like I said at the very beginning, are there people in the room that maybe weren't a close contact? It's possible. But I'd rather err on the side of safety and say, you know what? I think this is the best route, we're just gonna go that way. At the end of the day, if you wanna come in and you wanna say, that's not how we want you to do this anymore, you're more than welcome to do that.
Well, I was just going by what we were saying here for 6 feet, 15 minutes for over a 24-hour period. So I was just, if we went by this, and from what she said, it didn't seem like we were there. So I guess
There's
I just didn't.
also all that italicized stuff under there that talks about other things you have to take into consideration. As far as the proximity you are to some person, like I said before, I've taught math before, you've taught math before. If I'm working one-on-one with a kid and I'm answering a question for them and it only amounts to 2 minutes, I have a hard time not calling that person in close contact. Now, we can sit here and argue all night about whether somebody was or not. Ultimately, if we're doing the best we can to try to enforce the rule that's on the table right now. I've said from the very beginning, I would much rather err on the side of caution. Okay? So even if we, like I said, even if we ruled out, okay, there's a bunch of these kids that aren't close contacts. Okay? Like I said, I don't know that it's going to change our approach as far as what we're doing instructionally right now. It could potentially change who gets to go to some of these activities throughout the week if you want to do something like that. And again, that was not our intention to penalize kids and say, you can't go to volleyball next Tuesday, you can't go to football in the Dome on Thursday. It was just, what are we trying to do to keep our people as safe as we can?
And I don't think we had any proof or any data to rule Mark Miller was not a close contact and Slade was. We don't have a camera in that room. We know her teaching style. We know how she moves around the room. How do you look at a room of 18 kids that she was with for 2 hours and go, he's a close contact, he's not, when we don't have a camera in there?
Well, for me, I would just ask the teacher, which kids were you within 15 minutes? Because if she's teaching at the board for 30 to 35 minutes of a 15-minute period.
And in our classroom, it's not 6 feet from the board to the front of the thing, so the classroom she's in my end of the building, there's very little space there, so maybe you should come in and do the contract tracing for us, because I'll tell you, it's not very much fun, and it's not very much fun to get beat up by the parents like we've gotten beat up. If you want to do the contract tracing for me, I don't have a problem with it.
Since we have dealt with this right now in the 5th through 9th grade, have there been any positive tests of the students since they've been home?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we have a student,
Oh.
and we have a staff member.
So we must have done the right thing.
So,
Well,
here's the deal, okay? So, first thing we gotta figure out is, do you wanna do something different as far as what happens if you're a close contact as far as school exclusion goes. Right now, we're just saying, we're going with the Department of Health stuff, we're gonna exclude them for school and activities for 14 days, okay? After you figure out what you wanna do there, then go back and say, you know what, if I don't trust you, I don't believe that you did the contact tracing right, you guys can certainly just say, you know what, we're not gonna call anybody in there, close contact, we're gonna roll the dice. I still don't know that we're gonna change what we're doing instructionally this week, but that would open the door up for them to be able to go to volleyball tomorrow and go to football on Thursday. So.
I don't think from a legal standpoint that would be very wise. I think sticking with the DOH guidelines is probably the wisest path.
For the, as far as what we do with close contacts. I did have a,
Prevention, guys, ounce of prevention.
Yep.
I did have a survey I was gonna share with you. This was sent to superintendents in the state, and they sent out the results of this. As far as, some questions about if you're still following the Department of Health stuff for quarantine or for school exclusion, some stuff on masks. So basically there's 96 responses, and the first question was, has your school deviated from DOH's 14-day, and again, it should be school exclusion guidelines. So 62 people of the 96 said, yes, we've changed. There are still 34 schools that are following what the DOH says as far as quarantine stuff is concerned. If you flip to the second page, you get a little bit of a better idea of what some other schools that aren't doing the DOH stuff might be concerned. I will tell you that most of those, and it isn't noted on here, but most of those have some type of mask requirement tied on to a shorter quarantine period.
So what you're saying is they're out like so many days, and then if they have no symptoms, they
That's what
come back and wear a mask. So say it's 7 days, they're out 7 days. If they show no symptoms, they can come back after 7 days, but they have to wear a mask at all
So
times.
some of them, so there's two different ways to look at it. One is some people have the mask thing tied to the upfront part of it right away, like what Sioux Falls did and what some of those other schools, like if you and I are both wearing a mask and I test positive, you don't have to actually quarantine at all, as long as you don't have symptoms. Those that aren't using some type of mask tied thing up front are probably going with, okay, well, you're still gonna quarantine for X amount of time, and then if you don't have any symptoms, when you come back after that, then you would be required to wear a mask by the time you're here until your 14 days is up. So some variation of that somewhere or other. You know, I don't really know where they're coming up with some of their day requirements as far as like 5 days or 7 days or.
Yeah, I was just throwing numbers out there, I guess.
No, I mean, that's what some schools are using. I just don't know what the rationale for that is.
I know that's what the university that Emily goes to, University of Northwestern, they do. They sent out a thing in the email that they're going to, you test after 5 days, and then you can come back after 7 if the test is negative. And they quoted 3 different studies where it showed that it should basically run its course to where it should be detectable within those 5 days. I think that's where some of that data is coming from. But no, I thought that was very interesting. Is, like with these quick tests, is that kind of an expensive process? So if we would have a bunch of kids that are quarantined come back after 7 days and test them, is that just too expensive?
But if they come back, the only way we'd let them back into school under most of these situations is they couldn't have symptoms. If they don't have symptoms, the tests don't work. So somebody has to have symptoms in order for those tests to be valid.
Okay.
So if you're looking at some type of deal where you have to be out for 5 days, and then if you have a negative test, you can come back, that would have to be something that would have to be administered at a clinic or elsewhere in order to have an actual valid result to it.
And that's usually 2 or 3 days for results on that anyway.
It's longer than that now.
3 to 5, I think.
Is it?
It's 5, I had one that was just 5.
Because I was gonna say, I've had a few suggestions of doing something like that, and then actually, I think we had another email where they suggested going 7 days, and then 7 days with mask, and I don't know.
So basically, I just want to kind of, what I'm listening to is, you guys have decided as a board to follow the Department of Health and the medical experts. And we've had this discussion multiple times, and you've always decided to follow the health experts. So now that we have COVID in our building, and we have a few parents upset because of quarantine, now that we have COVID, we're considering going away from the health experts. Is that, am I understanding this correctly?
I'm not.
I'm just,
I don't
when we
think,
did have COVID,
Right
we
now,
were
we're
okay
just-
with the Department of Health, and
Right
now
now,
we have
we're just
COVID,
having
we
a
don't.
discussion.
I think we're just answering some, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just asking.
And I'll say the other question I've had, and I know we talked about it being deemed essential, but like, I've had a few people that are kind of having an issue with us allowing teachers back in, and I know that some of that has to do with whatever,
Yes.
adopted that,
That
and I know I've
was
heard a few people that
Brought
have
up to me too, because I'm
The only
considering
reason, the only
I
time,
have it on
the only
able to cover.
time,
What, you haven't had what? Sorry.
I've been able to get mine covered, I haven't brought anybody back out in quarantine, but I know there's been a couple situations down here.
There for sure is one down there, I know of one.
so, like when we talked about, when we passed that,
Fourth grade. She's been in the school teaching.
She's comes in the side door too.
Well, I mean, she's still, I mean, like, you know, like,
right, it's still.
it's still inside the building, and
So when
She
we,
don't have any contact with anybody.
well,
so when we did the essential worker thing to begin with, right, we talked about, we're doing this, we really don't want to have to use it, but there are some situations where we may. So, you know, basically, I mean, if you don't want us to do that, like, I know I've done it a lot more than he has. I've done it on this end because I just don't have people to cover that stuff. Like, even if it's, the teacher is able to teach from home, I still don't have anybody to put in that room to just watch the kids while they're there. One of those types of deals. So what it's really doing on our end is, you know, trying to avoid putting us in a situation where we have to send everybody home. Now, I realize right now that sounds really stupid because we have
10 kids in school.
10 kids in school.
right,
Yes.
but you understand what I'm, like, that's the, and I don't like to do it if I don't have to. But when you're dealing with somebody that has to be out of the building for 2 weeks from a teacher standpoint, like, you can maybe get somebody to cover for them a couple days in there, but able to do it the entire period of time. So like, I would agree, I don't really like to do it, but the people that we have had do it have been pretty good about, okay, these are what the expectations are in that resolution that you guys passed. You know, it says you're gonna wear a mask, you're gonna self-screen, you're gonna try to keep 6 feet, you know, at all times if possible, one of those types of things.
Right.
You know, and now that, I will tell you, that has been a little bit of the rationale, I think, behind the whole 7 day, like, you're gonna quarantine for 7 days, and then you're gonna come back and you're gonna be in a mask the whole time, and we're gonna self-screen you, because that's what schools are doing for the essential employee thing. So, you know, we're gonna do it for the teacher or another staff member that's an essential employee. Couldn't we just extend that towards, you know, a kid? You know, so that's what some of the rationale behind some of those abbreviated, you know, quarantine periods are.
On the essential worker deal, does it just say for close contacts?
Just
Or
for
is it-
close contact.
It's just for close contacts. So if they have somebody in their household with a positive
They're
test,
still a close contact. They would actually, the person would actually have to test positive in order to not be able to do the essential worker thing.
the teacher would have to test positive.
Correct.
In order to not be.
Right, so like if I have somebody in my house that tests positive, like, so say my wife tests positive, I'm just a close contact until I would actually test positive. So I could still continue going to school as an essential worker as long as I don't have symptoms. Unless, of course, I get tested and then we find out that I'm positive, then I have to stay home.
Your rules are different, right?
So,
The one thing I was wondering is like, for example, Sioux Falls had gone away from the 14-day and they implemented these various other things. And so if Sioux Falls was doing that, I thought, well, maybe there's other schools that can give us some good examples of how we can get our kids back into the school sooner without compromising immunity. The one thing that I was reading from the Argus Leader about what they did, and I think that one board member said our job is to educate kids. We're failing at that by keeping kids out for 14 days and maybe another 14 days. We're following some good protocol, but we can always revert back. We can always evaluate this. I just think this is a really good move for our students and our schools. So I was wondering, if there are some people out there that are finding ways to keep their kids in school, because I think what I'm hearing from a lot of parents is that it's hard if you're working parents at home, because then that takes you from your job to watch the kids, and then, and I think a lot of teachers say the kids fall through the cracks easier. You tend to have those kids that, kind of can fall through the cracks, but online, those are the ones that don't say anything. So I think there's a lot of concern there. So that's where I don't want to do anything that's unsafe, but I thought if there's some ways that we can get our kids back in action and better their education, I was, interested in exploring that.
well, I mean, prior to the last meeting, I think, what did I send you guys, like 4 different examples of what some of the other schools were doing?
Right.
And that's pretty much, I mean, in a nutshell, that's pretty much what, if somebody's done something different than DOH stuff, that's what it's been. It's been like a Sioux Falls deal where they up front say, if you're wearing masks, you don't have to quarantine at all if you don't have symptoms, one of those types of deals. Then you have the other stuff. I think that was kind of like what Harrisburg and Bridgewater, Emory, and some of them did with that. Then you have I don't even remember what Vibrant Hurley's was. It was some weird, they started picking random days.
to understand it.
They started picking random days as far as like, you're out for 7 days, but I think there was mask stuff involved in that too. I don't know. I talked to the Chester superintendent today, and we got on the topic of talking about some of this stuff.
You got chewed out by Gabriel, correct?
I did. Chester super, and he said they're doing something similar, like the mask on mask thing. Like if 2 people are wearing a mask, then we don't require a quarantine period. We just monitor them for symptoms over the course of the next 14 days. And basically what he said, and it made sense, he goes, we give parents the option. We still tell them that the safest bet would be to keep your kid home for 14 days. If you choose not to do that, and your kid was wearing a mask, then they can come back to school if they don't have symptoms. They have to keep a mask on the entire time they're there, and we'll screen them, a couple times a day, just to ensure that they don't have symptoms. So, last time around, we talked a little bit about the Sioux Falls plan. And then, the angle they're taking on that is, we're not gonna force people to wear masks, but we're gonna include that in our decision. The one scenario there that I have some issue with is, I'm wearing one, you're not, and you test positive, I still have to go home because you didn't wear a mask. That's the one that I think is gonna cause people some issue on that.
To be honest, the more I've thought about this, I still like the idea of the 14 days, but I think the reason it's obviously coming up is because we've got volleyball and state football, and yes, those are things that I wish every kid was able to go to, and I still like the idea of a 14-day if you're gonna do the safeness thing. I think the part I'm starting to, the more I've listened to people and thought about it is, it's hard for some people that don't have access to somebody to watch their kid or days off, like the financial strain that close contact 14-day thing with the idea of eventually you're gonna have another 14-day actual case, you know, like, so you're gonna take a month
Here's a
off.
good one for you though. Tell people to go get tested, because if you test positive, you can't be considered a close contact for 90 days.
But, right, but I mean, but what I'm saying is like, I mean, so, but even if their kid tested positive and they didn't,
Right.
the potential for the days off, and so like, I do kind of like the idea of 7 days and 7 days with a mask, but, you know, just for the idea of like the parents that can't, I mean, not that I can afford to take days off, you know, but my banker, one of my bankers on TV can probably tell you that, but, you know, like, people that can't even afford it more than I can, you know, like, I feel bad in that situation, you know what I mean? But it is what it is.
Affecting families.
Right, that's the one thing, but,
And I think when we did all this, it was so we didn't have to shut down completely.
right, no, I
And I
understand.
think people forgot about last April, about when we just closed their doors and they had them at home 24/7 for
Months.
months.
Right,
And that's what we're trying to avoid.
right. Well, and I understand, I just, you know, like, it's just, you know, like, and like, for you as an instance, if you would have been here for the 1 month and didn't get paid for it, I mean, maybe that puts a little bit of financial strain on you, you know, like, you know what I mean, like, so, and for your sake, it didn't affect you that way, but some people, do. You know what I'm saying, like, that's the only thing
Has there been anything with antibody testing that if somebody tests that way, that would be similar to a COVID positive test where you've got the antibodies already?
Not that I've heard of.
That's you, okay.
I'm not aware of a school that's using anything like
Yeah, it's still pretty price prohibitive, just from a regular consumer standpoint. You know, you said 3 months, so like would Rocky not be considered a close contact yet?
Yeah, technically he shouldn't be.
So I'm sending him to school tomorrow, he can hang out with you all day.
that. Depends when his test actually was, I
Was
suppose.
he July or August or?
Early August, yeah. So
So you
he's actually
probably
probably just
right-
passed his 30 days. 'cause
Right on.
It'd be 90 days.
90 days.
Right on the
Yeah.
border there, I suppose.
Okay, anybody else got anything else on that?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any interest or if we could just bring this up another time, but maybe there's no interest, that's fine too. I just thought if there's some way to help people out, get kids back in school with testing or something like that, but,
And Mark, I can tell you that I think everybody's so sick of this pandemic and everyone is so irritable about everything that it hasn't been fun for anybody,
Yeah.
at any level. And when you got your kid quarantined for 4 days, you're mad.
yeah, you have that quite a bit
Yeah.
in your own home, right? With the, yeah.
Okay, then the
So
whole.
are we,
I don't think we're changing anything.
are we just gonna leave it the way it is right now?
I think it was just a discussion, and I'm guessing it'll come up in another month or two, and we'll discuss it again then, probably, but.
We get another 90.
Yeah, right, I mean, yeah. Okay, and then a discussion regarding the format of board meetings. I think there's been, people that would like to come and sit and watch, like, and I don't even know if they necessarily partake, or maybe even they feel they can't to speak their opinion, and so that I know there's a group of people that would like to be able to come to meetings, and
So I will say this. I don't have any issue, somebody contacts me ahead of time, figuring out a way for them to talk about whatever they want to talk about. So I just don't know that that is a good reason to just open up completely to the public. I mean, like, for example, I don't know if Corey was already on, but I mean, I've had other people, where it's really easy to set up some type of conference call or a Zoom meeting for anybody to talk about whatever they want to talk about. I don't have an issue with that. I'm just not really in a position right now where I think it's a good idea to recommend changing what we're currently doing right now.
Have you got anybody contact you since, when's
Riley Gall,
he's the only one? Or-
Well, and after the public input, they can't give input anyway, so.
Right. I think more so they just would prefer to be,
Get their input online.
and, right, and so, anyway, I don't know,
I'm for it because I guess if you can have lots of people at a ball game, I mean, we can have 2 or 3. I don't know how many we normally have at a meeting, 2, 3. But I think there's a lot of people that feel like they don't have that opportunity. So I don't know, I would be in favor of opening it up so we can, even if they have to wear masks or whatever, but there's been a bunch of requests I've had for that, and I think it's just important to people, I don't know. So,
Sorry.
I don't know, and I think I mentioned the last month, to be honest, there are other boards that meet that are starting to let people come back, and even if it's just to watch, I don't, personally, we have the space with the gym or whatever, I would be okay with doing that also. And like you say, it's not gonna change much, but I know there are people that just would like to come and watch. So, I guess if we're able to social distance, I don't have a problem with that, but I don't know what everybody else feels. Nobody else feels, so that ends that discussion, I guess. Executive session, it looks like you don't have anything.
I do not.
All right, then we need a motion to adjourn the board meeting.
Second.
Motion by Cody, second by Slade, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, same opposed, same sign.
Oh, you get your requirements.
We can probably test in my house. Not to work on that.
So you give me a contact, I'll have your phone. You're still gonna work in
I'm pretty sure that's what mine is. I'm by myself all day.
And the only reason I let Jane in is because she comes in
No,
the side yard in the classroom by herself.
I understand it's easier. Right, I understand, I'm not saying I don't, I'm not saying I totally disagree with it.
She does
But,
the afternoons.
you know, like you touch the doorknob, you touch it, like,
You too.
there's still ways to spread, you know what I mean, like, and so that's where, you know, like, the little issue I have.
Is it adjourned?
But, wasn't that big thing?
Yeah.
It's winter.
You immediately knew where I was going.
It's a joke.
I tell you, I can't even give you too much crap because I got Dalvin Cook on my fantasy team, so I have to cheer for the Vikings a little bit. And they just